My friends, while the international media focuses on the rehearsed smile and the perfectly choreographed diplomatic handshake for the cameras, the Pentagon generals are poring over the ledger, analyzing an area of tension that Europe refuses to see. What is happening now, right before our eyes, is not a public relations crisis, it's not a fleeting headline friction, and definitely it's not the military apocalypse of the West. It's a silent structural fracture of the most powerful military alliance on the planet. And no one is talking about this with the surgical coldness that reading the geopolitical map requires. What happened was that the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Roth, landed at the White House for an emergency face-to-face meeting with Donald Trump just 2 weeks before the decisive summit in Turkey. The atmosphere in Washington was extremely tense. A true diplomatic minefield that exploded after the American Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, cornered the Europeans in Brussels. The reason? The unforgivable refusal of the European High Command to allow their bases and airspace for American forces to operate against Iran. Roth arrived in Washington armed with the oldest and most worn-out tactic in international diplomacy: desperate flattery. He went to Fox News, the network that sets the pace at the White House, to say that he supports Trump 100%. He sent flattering text messages that the president himself made a point of exposing on the internet, and he appealed to the mathematical promise that Europe will invest 5% of its GDP in defense by 2035. Look at the level of desperation of a continent that comfortably outsourced its protection for 80 years and simply forgot how to defend itself. Obviously, to be fair here, it was a proposal from the United States, which also made mistakes to a certain extent. To understand the seriousness of this scenario without falling into cheap hysteria, we need to apply a technical lens from military aviation: metal fatigue. In advanced engineering, metal fatigue happens when a structure undergoes extreme and repetitive stress for decades on end. On the outside, an aircraft wing, or the steel pillars still look shiny, imposing, and indestructible. But inside, at the microscopic level, the atomic bonds are shattered. NATO didn't collapse. It didn't die this morning. But it is suffering from irreversible metal fatigue. And the first major crack exposed in this structure is the fallacy of the omnipotence of the American stockpile. The United States. They still have the most lethal force on Earth, yes, that's unquestionable, but the proportion of that power has undergone a brutal course correction. Pay attention, 38 days. It only took 38 days of direct confrontation against Iran, which, in the power hierarchy, is an insignificant adversary and doesn't have a fifth-generation air force. But it depleted the American stockpiles of missiles, interceptors, and smart munitions to levels that triggered red alerts at the Pentagon. If a second-rate enemy drains the logistics of the superpower in a month, the military math is simple and ruthless. Resources are finite and the blanket has gotten shorter. In 1941, during World War II, the United States activated the arsenal of democracy. The car factories in Detroit stopped the civilian vehicle assembly lines and within weeks began churning out Sherman tanks, jeeps, and bombers on a frightening industrial scale. The economy was flexible and based on heavy steel. Today, modern warfare's tactical operations depend on precision microchips, rare earth elements monopolized by Asia, and hypersonic components that take years to forge and calibrate. The American arsenal is no longer a bottomless well. It's a bank account with a specific overdraft limit about to be exceeded. And that's going to collide head-on with the fiscal bomb of 2028. America's trillion-dollar debt isn't scary today, but in 2028, the inevitable increase in military spending will crush the budget ceiling. When the fiscal guillotine falls, the question in the situation rooms in Washington won't be how are we going to fund Europe's defense, but rather why are we still funding Europe's defense? This American tactical shortage clashes violently with the second factor of this metal fatigue, the inevitable geographic pivot. The world no longer revolves around the plains of Central Europe or the carpeted bureaucratic corridors of Brussels. The axis of power, money, and conflict has definitively shifted to the Taiwan Strait and the turbulent waters of the Arabian Sea. Maintaining billion-dollar supply chains and extremely expensive bases on a stabilized European continent has become a luxury that the containment of China's war machine no longer allows. The Americans are carrying out a tactical extraction of resources from the Atlantic to shield the Pacific. And they do this supported by the deconstruction of a myth, the paralyzing fear of the Russian monster. American intelligence knows by consensus that Russia has shrunk structurally. It no longer has the demographic weight, economic vitality, or technological leadership to be the global nemesis that the Soviet Union was. Russia has become a strictly regional problem, armed with old warheads, but unable to project power across multiple oceans. And in Cold War military doctrine, a regional problem requires regional containment. Let's put the numbers on the table. The European Union has a gross domestic product that is practically, and look at this, 10 times larger than Russia's. Europe is infinitely wealthier, has the technology, has the machinery, and has the human capital. They have all the money and the material base to crush any advance from Moscow on their own. So why should the average taxpayer in the state of Ohio, who can barely afford their mortgage, foot the billion-dollar bill to defend Berlin? If Berlin is 10 times richer than the enemy, what the Europeans lack is not funding. What they lack is the will to fight and the courage to take control of their own survival. And this lack of instinct exposes the divorce of values that destroyed the moral bond of the alliance. My friends, NATO was not born just as a cold military treaty. It was the backbone of a civilization project, the armed defense of what we used to call the free world. That glue has dried up. The European continent has been swallowed up by regulatory globalism, suffocated by the state. Meanwhile, Americans are accelerating toward the transactional and sovereigntist pragmatism of America first. It's exactly like a failed couple who, out of convenience, still live under the same roof, but don't sleep in the same room, don't share the same table, and don't agree at all on how to raise their children. And the trust is gone. And the ultimate proof, the most recent scar from this rupture, happened during the Iranian crisis. Europe didn't have the legal obligation under Article 5 to go to war in the Middle East. But when the American war machine needed airspace and bases to project rapid force, and Europe closed its doors, yes sir, they closed the doors to Donald Trump and Israel, the deep state got the message. The career diplomats, the four-star generals, and the intelligence analysts who shape Washington's future recorded that in the doctrine. Strategic trust takes 80 years, mountains of money, and a lot of blood to build, but it can collapse in just a few weeks of neglect. That European cowardice only validated the American reasoning. If you don't support us in our flashpoint, our umbrella won't cover you when the storm comes knocking at your door. And here's a bonus for those who are still watching me up to this point. Part of the reason why Europeans don't come to the aid of the United States in facing the terrorist dictatorship of Iran is because Europe has been taken over by Islamic radicals who receive orders directly from Iran. It's because there's a lack of testosterone to confront Islamic radicalism, and because, whether they like it or not, the Europeans were enjoying watching Donald Trump having to solve this problem alone, at the very least hoping that everything would go wrong and that the United States would leave there humiliated. And the result of this macabre equation is that the United States is not blowing up the alliance out of whim. They are simply turning on the lights in the morgue and forcing Europe to look at itself in the mirror. And the reflected image is that of a continent economically paralyzed and militarily in a state of terminal atrophy. And this is very serious. France is on track to reach a frightening 120% debt to GDP ratio by 2027. The cost of interest that the French government pays to banks will jump from 36 billion euros to almost 60 billion in the blink of an eye. And yet the French regime insists on nationalizing industry, destroying economic freedom. Italy has already sunk beyond 137 in debt. In the United Kingdom, the hole is so deep that the interest on the debt already swallows more public money than the entire budget of the British Ministry of Defence. You can't build modern war tanks, ships, and fighter jets when you're being strangled by the iron collar of creditors. Europe's defense industrial base, crippled by decades of radical environmentalism, has simply evaporated. While Russia adapts to a survival economy built for trench warfare, it spits out 250,000 heavy artillery shells every single month. All of Europe, shamefully, admits through its own European Commission that its factories are running at a meager 50% of the minimum necessary capacity. More than half of the European money injected into armaments over the last 2 years flew across the Atlantic to buy American equipment because Europe lost the ability to forge its own steel on a large scale. And guess who they handed it over to? Yes, if you said China, exactly, China. China now holds the technology that once belonged to Europe. And the deadliest diagnosis isn't in the factories, it's in the blood, the demographic and moral crisis in the trenches. Germany has already admitted that it will not reach the minimum target for soldiers by 2031. The other, once feared British Army has lost so many men that today it operates at its smallest size since the distant year of 1614. But the fact that marks the collapse of will is this. Recent brutal polls reveal that fewer than 1 in 5 Europeans would take up arms to defend their own country in the event of an external invasion. Where's their testosterone? State money can buy radars and missiles, but there is no budget in the world that can buy the willingness and courage of a people to bleed for their flag. The globalist paternalism that came from the United States has atrophied Europe's instinct for self-preservation. We are not declaring the death of the alliance today. We are laying bare the internal collapse of a structure that urgently needs recalibration. Because free protection really is over. If you see the board with the same strategic coldness as we do here in this community of analysts, if you don't swallow the pre-packaged narratives of the mainstream media, I want you to go down to the comments now and state our verdict. Show the algorithm our thesis is right, and show that our intelligence community reads between the lines of the world map. Type now in capital letters the words metal fatigue. I repeat, write it in the comments now. Metal fatigue. And just as entire powers suffer the silent wear and tear of not knowing how to position themselves in the face of the new reality, you too may be suffering from authority fatigue in your own career. My friends, pay close attention now to what I'm going to say. I need to be direct with you. You have an important message and tactical knowledge in your field, but you still remain completely invisible online. Do you record, delete, change your mind, see other people's mediocrity being rewarded every day, and wonder if your time has already passed? Look at the level of illusion you're falling into. The problem was never your lack of talent. It's not your story. The problem, pure and simple, is the lack of a killer method. No one is talking about this, but the internet has no mercy for the confused and doesn't crown those who just have a diploma hanging on the wall. It rewards those who master the architecture of communication, who know how to anchor the audience's attention in the first few seconds, who build a relentless narrative, who open their mouth and exude presence, turning an ordinary idea into a decree that the public is unable to ignore. And that's why I decided to break the pattern and do something unprecedented. On July 12th in Curitiba, I will unlock the black box of my method. I will lead an in-person intensive here inside my professional studio with my team. And I will show you the exact anatomy of how I built an audience that exceeds 50 million monthly views, going head-to-head with the system and without relying on paid traffic. And this, my friends, is not a motivational speech for crowds to clap. It's not just another generic recorded course. There will be only 10 people, 10 actual seats. We will spend the whole day breathing the same air in fully hands-on practice. You will learn maximum retention scripting, positioning, real-world recording, posture correction, and how to build unshakable authority on camera. You will leave here understanding how to structure your content, how to own your space, and how to stop looking like just another shadow begging for attention on the internet. Because there is a brutal gap between posting videos and building authority. anyone can post. Authority is forged with method, technique, and a reality check. So, if you know your voice needs to break out of anonymity, this immersive event is your turning point. The QR code is on your screen now. The link is pinned in the first comment and in the description. And if you want to get VIP access right this second, go down to the comments and type in all caps "I want." I'll send you the link right away. But I need to be strict with the numbers. There are only 10 spots. When the 10th one is taken, the steel door closes and that's it. July 12th in Curitiba. Type 1 want. Click the link or point your phone. Your voice wasn't born to die in silence. And most importantly, to monetize in dollars. Then, my friends, that's when the conversation changes. And don't waste any more time choosing a movie or a series to watch and falling into plot traps. Access our exclusive channel with tips on series and movies. A tactical and fantastic curation for you to just enjoy with your family. No couture walk, totally no whining. Don't waste any more time. Link in the description, in the pinned comment, and in the card that will appear on your screen. I want to know if you stayed with me until the end. How many degrees is it in your city today? Because here where I am, it's 5 degrees, can you believe it? See Shimauzinho guys all dressed up in a suit. In this cold, comment below. Now subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like on the video because it takes work to make it. Blend your mind, I'm Shimon Oliveira and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.